My name is Julie Moreau, and this is the story of how a single Christmas dinner upended everything I thought I knew about my family. 34, I finally confronted my mother's relentless criticism, revealing the hidden truth. For years, I had been quietly supporting the family financially, keeping the household afloat while my achievements went unacknowledged. What should have been a warm celebration of my engagement and a milestone in my career instead became a reckoning, peeling back layers of lies, favoritism, and quiet resentment. I grew up in a villa on the outskirts of Lyon, a home that seemed straight from a postcard, with ivy curling along stone walls and lavender swaying in the breeze. To anyone looking in, we were flawless, a family of success and refinement. My father, Henri, a retired literature professor, offered kindness but often drifted into the world of his books. My mother, Vivienne, carried herself with the poise of a gallery director yet wielded her words like weapons. My older brother, Julien, 37, was celebrated as the family prodigy, a brilliant neurosurgeon. My younger sister, Camille, 30, was the golden child, a rising barrister admired by everyone. And then there was me, Julie, the middle child, constantly overlooked, silently scrambling for approval that never seemed to arrive. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. From childhood, I had understood my place in our family hierarchy, a position that seemed predetermined and unchangeable. Julien's mediocre grades were celebrated with lavish praise, his accomplishments constantly placed on a pedestal. My straight A's, on the other hand, were met with little more than a curt nod, a faint acknowledgement that never matched the effort I poured into my studies. Camille's childish whims and occasional tantrums were labeled charming or endearing, yet the smallest protest I dared voice was branded disrespectful or ungrateful. Even as a child, I learned to measure my words, to tiptoe carefully around my mother's sharp tongue, to avoid any glance or gesture that might betray a hint of self-assertion. By the age of 16, I had taken matters into my own hands. I worked weekends at a local boulangerie, kneading dough and wiping counters with aching hands, and tutored English in the afternoons, saving every franc I could. It wasn't because my family struggled financially, we were far from poor, but because I believed that contributing tangible value might finally make them see me. I longed for the recognition, for even a moment of unguarded pride or affection from the people whose approval had seemed perpetually out of reach. I meticulously saved for months, carefully choosing gifts that required thought and effort rather than money. For my mother's birthday, I picked a set of hand-painted porcelain cups, delicate and intricate, reflecting her love for beauty and detail. For my father, Henri, I found a rare collection of poetry from a local Lyon publisher, a book that I knew would touch his scholarly heart. Camille received a silk scarf, soft and elegant, something I imagined she would twirl dramatically during her law school events. Yet when the day came, my parents' eyes lit up at Julien's generic wine bottles, a gift chosen in under 5 minutes, or Camille's last-minute trinkets grabbed from a boutique in the city. I had poured thought and labor into my presents, and yet the reaction was always warmer toward them, a constant reminder that my efforts were never enough. Determined to find my own path, I pursued digital marketing at university, captivated by its rare blend of creativity and analytics. I was fascinated by how campaigns could shape perception, how content could move people emotionally, and how data could measure impact in real time. When I shared my decision with Vivienne, her expression darkened almost immediately. "Marketing," she said, lips tight. "That's just frivolous advertising. Why not something substantial, like Julien's medicine or Camille's law?" Her words cut deep, an echo of the subtle devaluations I had endured since childhood. Still, I pressed on, refusing to let her narrow expectations define me. University became both my escape and my proving ground. I graduated with honors from Lyon, each lecture and late-night project a brick in the foundation of my independence. I joined a boutique digital agency immediately after, immersing myself in client campaigns, social media strategies, and content creation. I worked relentlessly, staying late nights to perfect presentations, volunteering for extra projects, and earning a reputation as someone reliable, talented, and innovative. I wanted to prove not just to myself, but to the family who barely noticed me that I was capable of excellence. Yet, even as milestones accumulated, I felt the sting of invisibility. Every promotion, every successful campaign, every client compliment I shared over a phone call or in a message home was met with a lukewarm response. "That's nice, Julie," Vivienne said once, her tone clipped. "Did you hear Julien published a paper? Or Camille won a high-profile case?" That phrase became a refrain, a shadow trailing every achievement I dared celebrate. It was never about me. Their pride, their excitement, seemed perpetually reserved for the children who fit the narrative of success they had always preferred. I tried tirelessly to earn their love. I sent birthday cards, made weekly phone calls, and offered help whenever possible. When my parents decided to move to a grander villa 4 years ago, I didn't hesitate. While Julien and Camille were too busy with work or social obligations, I spent my vacation days painting walls, hauling furniture, and helping arrange the new home. Every scratch of the brush and lift of a sofa was done with quiet hope that my dedication might be acknowledged, that perhaps this time my efforts would pierce the invisible wall separating me from their approval. And yet, even then, I remained the invisible child, the middle sibling whose presence was taken for granted. Each action, no matter how thoughtful, was expected, a duty rather than a gift. I learned to internalize disappointment, to swallow resentment, and to cultivate a careful optimism that never fully blossomed into expectation. My life became a series of efforts met with indifference, a rhythm of striving and being overlooked, shaping me into someone who could endure neglect, navigate subtle cruelty, and yet remain quietly determined. Even in adulthood, the lessons of my upbringing remained vivid. The constant comparison, the favoritism toward Julien and Camille, and the relentless pressure to meet impossible standards left marks that shaped not only my ambitions but my sense of self-worth. I found solace in my work, in friends who recognized my efforts, and in small victories that no one else seemed to notice. Yet the ache of invisibility lingered, an uninvited companion that shadowed every achievement and celebration. By the time I stood in my apartment in Lyon, reviewing the final details of my engagement announcement and preparing to share my career successes with my family, I knew that this dinner, like all those moments before, would be a test. A test not of my skills or accomplishments, but of whether my family could finally see me, truly see me, for who I was. A daughter, a sister, and a woman who had given her all and asked for nothing more than recognition and love in return. It was this understanding, this simmering awareness of decades of being overlooked, that fueled the courage I would need that evening. The stories of birthday gifts ignored, hours of work unacknowledged, and achievements diminished were not just memories, they were a record of my quiet perseverance, a ledger of effort that had built me into someone my family could no longer ignore. I had spent a lifetime measuring myself against Julien and Camille, trying to find my place within a family that seemed determined to define me by comparison. But now, armed with the knowledge of my worth and the accomplishments I had quietly amassed, I was ready to challenge that narrative, to claim a space in the family story that had always been denied to me. That Christmas dinner, I would not be invisible. I would not be overlooked. I would speak, and the truth I had carried for decades would finally have its voice. When Henri suffered a sudden cardiac episode that required emergency bypass surgery, I didn't hesitate. I took leave from work without question, reorganizing my entire schedule to ensure I could drive him to appointments, sit with Vivienne through long, tense nights at the hospital, and manage the small but crucial details of his care. Julien, ever the prodigy, was caught up in surgery rotations and hospital rounds. Camille, my mother's darling, was busy with court cases and client briefs that seemed to matter more than our father's health. And yet, through it all, I was expected to keep them in the loop, updating them constantly on every minor change, while the sacrifices I made went unnoticed. When Vivienne later scolded me for not sending enough messages during a particularly stressful week, I swallowed the frustration that had become a quiet, constant companion throughout my life. Worst of all, no one knew the extent to which I had been quietly supporting them. For 4 years, I had been sending Vivienne €1,800 every month to cover the mortgage on their villa, once Henry's pension began to dwindle. I had paid €5,000 for his medical bills, €3,000 to cover Camille's bar exam fees, and €6,000 to clear Julien's lingering student loans. Vivienne had sworn me to secrecy, claiming that revealing my contributions would humiliate the family, that the truth would somehow tarnish their carefully maintained image of independence and superiority. I obeyed, quietly bearing the financial burden and the emotional weight of invisible generosity. Through these years, I had grown accustomed to performing acts of devotion with no expectation of acknowledgement. It became a pattern. Anticipate their needs, cover their gaps, and absorb the criticism and dismissal that inevitably followed. I became a shadow in my own family, perpetually behind the scenes, yet responsible for keeping everything from collapsing. I learned to smile through exhaustion, to offer reassurance while hiding my frustration, and to accept that my efforts were likely to be overlooked or even resented. Then came last October, a moment that would shift the trajectory of my life. Adrien, my partner of 5 years, orchestrated a quiet, unforgettable proposal. Under the starlit sky by the serene shores of Lyon, he knelt, presenting a delicate emerald ring that glimmered with the promise of unconditional love. In that instant, the world outside the lake, family politics, unspoken resentments, unacknowledged sacrifices, faded into insignificance. Adrien's gaze told me what my family never had, that I was seen, appreciated, and loved wholly for who I was. Only days later, my career reached a milestone that validated years of relentless effort. My agency promoted me to Director of Digital Campaigns, granting a €25,000 raise and a team of my own. I had arrived at a place where my skill, dedication, and creativity were recognized on their own merit, no comparisons required. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of being fully seen, fully valued, and fully capable. I longed to share these two monumental moments, the engagement and the promotion, with my family, hoping, perhaps naively, that the recognition and pride that had eluded me for decades might finally arrive during the Christmas celebrations. Christmas morning at the villa, however, arrived with the same external perfection as every year before. Fairy lights twinkled across the façade, reflecting off the frost-kissed garden. The scent of freshly baked pain au chocolate mingled with mulled wine wafting from the kitchen. Chansons de Noël played softly in the background, mingling with the gentle chatter of relatives who were never early enough to lend their presence without a flourish. I arrived at 8:30 a.m., arms full of carefully wrapped gifts, Adrien's ring tucked safely in my purse, a secret waiting for the perfect moment. He was spending the holidays with his family in Bordeaux, leaving me to navigate the minefield of my own blood relatives. Walking into the villa, I felt the familiar mix of anticipation and dread. Every ornament, every garland, every flickering candle seemed to remind me of my invisible role, of years spent performing acts of devotion unnoticed and unappreciated. I set the gifts on the polished dining table, placing them neatly alongside the small pile of food contributions I had prepared, from delicate pastries to artisanal jams. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this year would be different. I was no longer the overlooked middle child, no longer a background figure whose efforts were only acknowledged in whispers or as obligatory thank yous. Vivienne appeared, impeccably dressed, hair perfectly styled, her smile just enough to mask the habitual critique that had been her currency all my life. She greeted me with a faint nod, barely glancing at the gifts in my hands, her attention already caught by Julien and Camille's expected arrivals. Yet beneath my practiced calm, a spark of defiance flickered. I had carried the family through crises they had barely acknowledged. I had supported them financially, emotionally, and logistically, often at great personal cost. And now I was armed with proof of my own accomplishments, my own happiness, and my own love story that no one could diminish. I moved to arrange the table, making small adjustments, as though my touch alone could bring a sense of warmth and order. The room smelled of pine, chocolate, and the faint undertone of candle wax. The familiar hum of the heater mingled with the distant carolers outside, creating an oddly comforting atmosphere. I paused, glancing at my reflection in the windowpane, seeing a woman poised, confident, and resolute, a stark contrast to the invisible child of years past. As the clock ticked closer to the official family gathering, I felt a nervous energy, an anticipation that bordered on fear. How would they react when I revealed not just my engagement but the extent of my contributions, the truth that I had been the quiet lifeline sustaining their privileged lives? Would they finally recognize my worth, or would I be dismissed once more, my achievements overshadowed by the familiar favorites? Questions lingered, heavy in the crisp morning air, yet I knew one thing with clarity. This Christmas, the pattern would end. I was ready. Henri greeted me warmly at the door, his eyes crinkling with genuine affection. "Julie, my dear, how is your job?" he asked, his tone filled with the curiosity and pride I had longed to hear over the years. My heart raced, fueled by the anticipation of the news I had been holding close. "I have huge news," I said, struggling to steady my voice while feeling the surge of courage rising inside me. Vivienne appeared in the hallway like a sudden gust of cold air, her eyes immediately sweeping over me with a critical precision I had learned to anticipate. She stopped in front of me, scrutinizing my emerald green dress as though it were an offense. "Julie, that shade makes you look pale. And your hair, did a storm hit it?" she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the festive warmth of the morning. I forced a polite smile, the tight curve of my lips betraying the flutter of nerves beneath. "Merry Christmas, ma man." "I spent an hour getting ready," I replied evenly, attempting to meet her gaze with calm composure. She merely shrugged, dismissive, already shifting her attention elsewhere. "Camille's new Chanel suit is divine. Ask her for fashion tips," she added, as if my existence were merely a backdrop to highlight Camille's perfection. In the salon, Camille reclined gracefully on a velvet armchair, flawless in a tailored blazer, her hair shining under the soft morning light. She smirked at my entrance, the expression both familiar and infuriating. "Late again, Julie?" she asked, her tone teasing yet edged with superiority. I swallowed the familiar sting and offered a curt nod, refusing to let her undercut the resolve I had nurtured all morning. Julien, my ever-aloof older brother, lounged on a leather sofa, scrolling through his phone in a bespoke suit, barely glancing up as if my presence was a minor disruption to his otherwise perfect morning. The gift exchange began, following the same predictable ritual it had for years. Julien's impersonal gift cards, chosen with little effort, earned Vivienne's gushing praise. She cooed over them as though they were tokens of exceptional thoughtfulness, setting the tone for a morning steeped in favoritism. Camille's extravagant gift, a weekend at a Provence chateau, sparked animated chatter, everyone around the room admiring the glamour and sophistication of her choice. When it came to my carefully selected presents, the contrast was stark. I had spent months preparing thoughtful, meaningful gifts, a signed neurology text for Julien, a monogrammed leather portfolio for Camille, and a handcrafted photo album compiling decades of family memories I had painstakingly digitized. My gifts received polite thanks at best, followed almost immediately by Vivienne pivoting the conversation back to Julien's new car, which she labeled a well-deserved bonus, and Camille's successes, naturally worthy of endless admiration. As cousins, aunts, and uncles began arriving, the villa buzzed with the lively chaos of holiday greetings and polite laughter. I slipped into my habitual role, helping Vivienne in the kitchen with the kind of silent efficiency that had become second nature. "The cocoa vin needs checking," she instructed, chopping herbs with practiced precision. "Camille's too busy charming everyone," she added, the comment both praise and condemnation in one. I swallowed the frustration rising like bitter steam and nodded, moving to the stove to stir the sauce, adjusting the heat as needed, all while maintaining the calm, smiling exterior that had allowed me to survive years of subtle dismissals. By the time dinner was served, the table gleamed under the soft glow of the chandelier, the heirloom Sèvres china arranged with meticulous care. Each plate, each crystal glass, each silver utensil was a reminder of the family's wealth, elegance, and the standards they held, and the standards I was always expected to silently meet. I took my seat between Cousin Amélie and an empty chair, reserving my space for Adrien in my mind, as he could not join me this year. I placed my hands neatly on my lap, steadying the excitement and the tension that had been coiled in my chest all morning. Dessert, the moment I had been waiting for, would mark the unveiling of my carefully guarded news, Adrien's engagement proposal and my professional promotion. I had rehearsed the words countless times, imagining how I would share the news with a blend of calm pride and quiet defiance. The room around me was filled with the familiar sounds of holiday cheer, yet beneath the laughter and clinking glasses, a quiet storm of anticipation brewed in my mind. Would they finally see me? Would they acknowledge not just my achievements, but the years of dedication, sacrifice, and hidden support I had provided? I looked around the table at my family, each absorbed in their own conversations. Henry's warm gaze occasionally met mine, a brief island of comfort in the sea of judgment and expectation. Vivienne flitted from topic to topic, her eyes sharp, her remarks subtly cutting, always comparing, always evaluating. Camille's poised elegance drew attention naturally, while Julien's casual arrogance seemed to demand admiration. And yet, I felt a new sense of resolve coursing through me, a conviction that this year would be different. I would no longer wait silently for recognition that never came. I would claim my voice, my achievements, and the joy I had fought so hard to create for myself. As the candles flickered and the room filled with the warmth of family chatter, I adjusted my dress, straightened my shoulders, and allowed myself a brief moment to inhale deeply. I was ready. Ready to step out of the shadows, ready to reveal the truth, ready to share the news that had the power to shift the family dynamic forever. I could feel the electricity of anticipation building, a tension that mirrored the emotions I had carried for decades. For years, I had been the silent pillar, the invisible support, the overlooked middle child. But tonight, with Adrien's love shining in my heart and my career finally recognized, I would step forward and ensure that for the first time in my life, Julie Moreau could not be ignored. The stage was set. The family, oblivious to the storm about to erupt, carried on with holiday cheer. And I, with my heart racing and my mind focused, prepared to shatter the familiar script of favoritism, indifference, and dismissal that had defined Christmas mornings for as long as I could remember. Tonight, I would be seen, I would be heard, and the invisible child would finally claim her place at the center of the room. The conversation at the Christmas table had been predictable for years. Julien's hospital board appointment, Camille's latest courtroom victory, and endless commentary from Vivienne on the excellence of her golden children. I had navigated these conversations for decades, silently enduring the favoritism, the subtle insults, and the unspoken hierarchy that relegated me to the background. But that morning, something within me shifted. When my grandmother, Margot, leaned forward and asked gently, "Julie, how's work?" I seized the moment, my voice clear despite the flutter of nerves. I got promoted to director of digital campaigns, leading my own team. For a heartbeat, the room paused, but Vivienne immediately interjected, her voice sharp and dismissive. "Marketing's not a real career, Julie. It's just social media nonsense. You should have studied medicine or law." The words, a familiar dagger, tightened my chest, but I refused to falter. Pulling the small emerald ring box from my purse, I met her icy gaze with calm resolve. "There's more," Adrien proposed. "We're engaged." I opened the box slowly, letting the delicate ring catch the light. The room went silent. Henry's eyes softened with pride, Margot's hands squeezed mine in encouragement, yet Vivienne's expression remained unreadable, cold as ever. "Engaged for months, and you hid it?" Vivienne snapped, her tone venomous. "So secretive, Julie." Hurt pricked at my chest, but I held my ground. "I wanted to share in person," I said, my voice steady despite the rising emotion. Julien, glancing briefly from his phone, asked, "Adrien's job again?" Though I had told him countless times. "He's a literature professor," I replied. Vivienne sniffed dismissively. A professor. At least it's stable, she said, as if stability were the only measure of worth. Camille smirked across the table. Hope he's ready for you, Julie. You're the difficult one. Vivienne nodded approvingly. Always so challenging, never making life easy, she added. Dessert arrived like a false crescendo, the clink of porcelain punctuating Vivienne's words. She leaned in, eyes narrowing. I'm worried for Adrien. What man proposes to you? You're 34, scraping by in that cramped flat with a job that's barely respectable. You're our most worthless child. The words fell like stones across the table. Amélie gasped. Henri shook his head in disbelief. Even Julien and Camille looked stunned. For years, I had absorbed this cruelty silently, internalizing the humiliation, but this time, clarity and rage surged within me. I rose slowly, locking eyes with Vivienne. Stop calling me when you need money, I said, voice low but unwavering. Her face drained of color. What are you talking about? She stammered. I pulled out my phone, opening the banking app, the 1,800 euros I've sent you every month for 4 years for your mortgage, the 5,000 euros for Papa's surgery, the 3,000 euros for Camille's exam fees, the 6,000 euros for Julien's loans. I let the digits and transactions speak for themselves. Aunt Sabine's fork clattered onto her plate, Uncle Marcel's jaw tightened, and Margot's gaze bore into Vivienne with a hard, piercing intensity. Last year, I continued, when Julien's loans defaulted, who paid? Me. With savings I had been setting aside for my own home. And you swore me to secrecy, saying it would shame them. I've been your bank while you called me worthless. Julien paled, shock crossing his features. Julie, I didn't know. Because Vivienne hid it, I said firmly. She said it would hurt your pride. But what about mine? I've sacrificed my future while you all sneered and belittled me. Vivienne tried to deflect, her voice rising. It was temporary help. 4 years isn't temporary, I snapped, every syllable deliberate. I've lived on the edge so you could live in this villa while you humiliated me. Margot gripped my hand, steadying me. Why hide this, Julie? She asked softly. I thought helping would earn me love, respect. But nothing I did was enough. My voice rose, fueled by years of suppressed emotion. Why does Adrien love me? I demanded. He sees someone who's held this family together while being treated like dirt. He sees the strength you ignored, Camille whispered. I didn't know about the fees. I shook my head slowly. You never asked. Neither did Julien. You assumed I was fine because it was easier than caring. Margot's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Vivienne, I'm appalled. Julie's sacrificed for you all, and you call her worthless? That's unforgivable. Vivienne faltered, stammering, attempting to regain control. You're exaggerating, Julie. Families help each other. I shook my head, the room vibrating with my certainty. No. Families respect each other. You've used me as a cash machine while shaming me. That stops now. I grabbed my coat, letting the finality of my actions fill the air. Adrien and I will build a life without your venom. If you want to be part of it, show respect. If not, don't call. I walked out, leaving a stunned table behind me. The aftermath was explosive. Henri called, horrified at the revelations, admitting he had no idea of the extent of my support. I should have stopped her, he said, guilt heavy in his voice. Julien offered to repay me, confessing he had turned a blind eye to my struggles. Camille, defensive at first, eventually softened after Margot's reprimand reminded her of responsibility and empathy. Vivienne left frantic voicemails, oscillating between denial and tearful apologies. By December 30th, her voice trembled over the phone. I was wrong, Julie. You're not worthless. I was hard on you because I saw my own insecurities in you, a middle child overlooked. I'm sorry. I set boundaries that day, no more financial support, no more criticism masquerading as advice. Vivienne vowed to change, and over time she took small steps toward genuine respect. 6 months later, Adrien and I married in a sun-drenched vineyard near Avignon, surrounded only by those who respected us: Henri, Margot, Sabine, and Amélie. Vivienne attended, subdued but present, making quiet gestures of goodwill. My career flourished. I launched my own consultancy, leveraging my promotion and experience to mentor others and shape the digital campaigns I had once only dreamed of leading. Henri and I grew closer, Julien worked to make amends, and Camille remained distant but aware, a quiet acknowledgement of the family dynamics finally shifting. Through all this, I learned that family is earned through love, respect, and shared values, not blind duty or financial dependence. With Adrien's unwavering devotion, Margot's wisdom guiding me, and my own hard-earned strength, I built a life where my worth was no longer questioned or diminished. I discovered the power of speaking truth, standing firm, and refusing to let others define my value. Christmas, that had once been a source of pain, became the catalyst for freedom, dignity, and a life I had finally chosen for myself. If you've ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or trapped in a family dynamic that diminishes your worth, know that you are not alone. Stand firm, speak your truth, and build the life you deserve. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder of their strength. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to follow more stories of courage, resilience, and triumph over adversity. Your voice matters. Never let anyone silence it.